allow me to read this. In accordance with Governor Baker's executive order permitting virtual meetings during COVID pandemic, the PEG Access Advisory Committee is conducting this meeting today, June 10th, 2020 at 10 o'clock a.m. Eastern on Zoom platform in accordance with the town's policy directives and guidelines issued April 1st, 2020 and amended May 7th. I ask that all PEG committee members, town staff, and presenters activate their video and mute their microphone unless they have something to say in anticipation of or are participating in the committee dialogue. The meeting is being recorded and will be available for viewing later on the town's website. All committee votes will be taken via roll call. We will start with an attendance roll call. I will announce your name. Please reply. For members of the public, please unmute yourself when I've opened the meeting to public comment. So from a roll call viewpoint, let me start with Carlin Reed.
Here.
Peggy Worland.
Here.
Wally Johnson.
Here.
Vince Carlson. Eugene Chang, who is moving to Hawaii today. Ruth Laura.
Oh.
Ruth?
She has to unmute.
How about that? Am I
That's
still here?
Yep.
There you go.
And then I have Jane Hotchkiss, or Kate Hotchkiss, excuse me.
No Kate?
Oh, yeah, I'm here, but I'm not part of the committee.
Okay.
Oh.
Okay, so we don't do a roll call on you. Have I missed anyone? I was going off the distribution. Wally, did I get you? Are you part of?
You to get one.
Okay, thank you. I apologize for.
Jane will be joining us.
Okay.
In 15 minutes.
So relative to the
Yeah.
agenda.
Also, just want to let you know, Philip Shevitz, I'm the new station manager at Minuteman Media, so I'm just sitting in.
Thank you, Phil. I'm sorry, I should have made note of that.
No, you brought it on up there. I just wanted to get it in. Thank you.
Okay, so I've covered the disclosure. I've done the roll call of attendees. There's a couple things I would just general business items that I'll stick in here, and then we'll go on to the minutes. The general business things are, first of all, I'd like to make a move that I'd like to ask that Frank Breen be added to the committee. And so this is something for Jeremy to put on the agenda for the next select board. Is that something that can be done?
Name.
I'm
Right.
sorry?
You tell me his last name just so I can make sure he has a green card and everything, and I'll send you an email about this as well.
Okay. Frank Breen is on the screen here. And Frank, have you filled out a green card?
I did, yes.
Okay, cool. So
Okay.
I think that,
Scott,
yes.
an issue could possibly be that Frank has already served. And according to the town policy, we generally don't recycle, if that's a word, even though even though Frank was a very highly productive member of this committee and the committee.
I was going to say, we do try to let other people have a chance to join the committee before we start assigning new members who have already served. So we might want to leave the space open and sort of advertise that it is open and see if there's anybody else that wants to join, since, I mean, Eugene just resigned as of officially today. So
I'm resigning as well. Frank is my replacement. So there are going to be more openings, but that's okay.
I'm sorry, but just a procedural thing. This is Kate Hodges. So the committee, can make a recommendation. It goes
Yes.
on a select board agenda where the nomination is there, and then the nomination stays until the following meeting when the determination is made. So Frank, the committee cannot appoint their own members. Additionally, Ms. Lauer is correct that Frank has already served, and so what would generally happen is that you'd have to go through several meetings with the vacancies before they would recycle or go back to people who had already served. So I don't,
Okay.
doesn't mean he can't be a participant and recognized by the chair, but he wouldn't be a voting member. And again, there would be a process in place for that.
Okay, thank you. Actually, so I have a couple quick questions. First of all, is it possible to get a list of those individuals? First of all, is it our responsibility, and is it possible for us to get a list of those individuals that have submitted green cards either in paper or online, asking to be involved in the PEG committee? Or is that something that would be the responsibility of the select board?
I think that it's always helpful to have the board be responsible in that. So I wouldn't say that, you know, you would be sanctioned if you didn't, but I think it would be in the best interest of the committee if, is Jeremy still on the call?
Yeah, I am. I was just going to say. Yeah,
could you forward a list of anybody that submitted a green card that has an interest in MMN to the chair?
Yes, definitely. That's something that I'm actually.
And Frank, have you resubmitted a green card or re-upped? I don't know as if you need to fill it out a second time, but send something that has your interest in serving on another term officially. And if not, could you please do that?
I did, yes. Online,
You
I
did?
did, yes.
Forgive me, I don't see those
Oh.
things, so I'm not sure. That's great. Okay, so then Frank, of course, would be on the list that you would receive.
Okay. So the other thing I heard in our dialogue here was someone else, while I was taking notes, said that they were resigning. Who was that?
Oh, sorry, it's Peggy Wargelin. My term is up. I was just for a 2-year term originally. And so in theory, I expired in May, but we didn't have town meeting. So technically I'm still here till town meeting, but if I can find a replacement before then, it would be lovely because I've sort of moved on to other volunteer things, but I'll try to hang on as long as needed.
Okay.
Scott,
Yes.
that shows that we have 2 vacancies. We have a need to get them filled as quickly as possible. So I would encourage you to talk to Jane Hotchkiss when she comes on and get at least one of the seats filled so that we can make sure we have a quorum for our next meeting.
Okay.
Scott, if I may, just to clarify my position, if we had held a town meeting in April, I would no longer be on the school committee. I will now, looks like, be on until we have a town meeting. So I'll continue to serve on here until then. And the committee will nominate somebody to participate here in my stead. So
Okay.
that'll happen.
Because your role being the liaison with the school committee.
Yeah, but we have liaisons to committees. We have a couple of committees where we actually serve on the committee. This is one.
I see. Okay, doke. So clearly that's an action item for me, is to move that forward quickly to find other folks that can participate so that we can maintain a quorum. Next item that I have on my list, which is going to the meetings and minutes. So the first part of that is the discussion when we would have the next meeting. I guess typically for this committee, the meetings are not held in July and August, and with the COVID and all the shifting that's been going on around here, I think last year we did meet during the summer, but things are starting to stabilize, and so maybe the right answer is a late August would be the next meeting. That's my suggestion, if there's any commentary on this. Early September. Carlin?
I think that's a good idea. Either one's fine. My calendar is open right now, so whatever's good.
That's true for me as well at this point. So I don't know if we can, I don't have a calendar handy in front of me, but maybe I'll do by email, propose some dates around the end of August or early September.
Okay. I think that's a good idea.
And then are you recommending that we fall into the monthly category, Zooming if necessary until the governor has changed his directives? Or do you think we should do this ad hoc, only set up one meeting at a time?
Well, it might be useful to get a date on the calendar, because I guess this is a Zoom license issue. So it'd probably be better to put it on sooner. And given, I think it's for that reason and just the logistics of people being notified for these meetings, a better warning is better. It would be better. So my suggestion.
I agree. Yeah.
So I would presume the way we would transition back out of it is to continue to set it as a Zoom meeting until such time as we know that we can go back to a physical meeting. And then at that point, we just cancel all the subsequent meetings. So that would be my approach.
Excellent. So if I understand you, Scott, that means you'll send us a note about possible August and September meeting?
Yeah, so I will send a note about a possible end of August or beginning of September meeting, and probably the one after that as well. I certainly would welcome any suggestions relative to the timing of these, relative to when we anticipate town meeting, because I know that there's tie into that. And that's the only other thing I think has a bearing on this.
I think that sounds good. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the last minutes. Let me just stop for a second. Hi, David. I see you've just joined. You're muted. You'll have to unmute yourself to. I just want to mention, just for your information, that the meeting is being recorded, and we've just done opening comments, agenda, discussion, and we're just now getting ready to start on the previous meeting's minutes. David, you are muted, so we can't hear you. There you go.
Yes. Thanks so much for
okay.
letting me know. Do appreciate it.
Yeah, and the part of the guidelines we said was, folks, we would prefer you stay muted unless you're talking, and I can tell you from as you get to larger and larger meetings, that becomes more and more important. So if you don't mind, just
definitely
take the opportunity to mute yourself, unless you're going to be actively involved in a conversation.
Have I missed a great deal here, or?
No, I was just telling you that what we've covered is the opening disclosure, roll call of attendees, and planning for the next meeting. That's all we've discussed so far.
Do we have a date on the next meeting? I better check that.
I'm going to send around a proposed time by email, but we're thinking late August or early September.
Thanks so much. I'm going to mute myself here.
Okay. So the next item is you've been, the committee has received the January minutes. So we need to review those and discuss if there's any edits or changes.
Are there any edits? I took the minutes, so if there are any corrections, I'll make them. Otherwise, a motion to accept as stated? Question? Oh, come on, somebody, give me a motion.
I move that we accept the minutes as presented from January 29th meeting.
Can I get a second, please?
Can I second it?
Second.
Okay, now, so for voting, I guess we have to do a roll call vote. So give me a second here. Carlin?
Aye.
Peggy?
Aye.
Let's see, who else? Ruth?
Aye.
Scott, yes. And that's it, right? Wally doesn't have a vote in this context, right?
Yes, he does.
Oh, Wally?
Aye.
I think we're set. Okay. And passes unanimously. Thank you very much.
I'll go ahead and get the final send off to the town clerk for posting. Thank you very much, all.
Okay. Okay, the next item on the agenda is for Vince to talk, and unfortunately he's not here, right? So, I'm sorry, Carlin.
Yeah, I'm going to be Vince, channeling him for a few moments for this item, so let me know when you're ready.
I'm ready now.
Okay. This is going to be, the topic is proposed essential broadband discussion. Vince is not here to lead it, so all I'm going to do today is just give a couple of highlights of it. No action item required because this is a document. This is information that was just sent out today. I've gone through it. A couple of notes I'm going to highlight for this purpose, but I would hope that this would be on the next agenda item for the next meeting, Scott.
Okay.
To talk about more thoroughly when Vince can be here to guide us through the very basic points. Okay. I'm going to touch on a couple things very quickly. Again, this is a proposal for the committee to discuss. There's a 2-pager that was sent out today. The Concord Broadband Essential Subscriber Project is what it's called. The first part of this document talks about what the Comcast Internet Essentials program is, which is what Comcast does for low income. It offers a service for $9.95 a month to low income and to seniors. And the proposal is to create something like that here in Concord, if possible, because we don't have a corollary broadband service. Now, broadband is important because, as our survey showed, about half of the people who watch MMN watch it using their internet connection, not just their cable TV connection, but their internet connection. So Vince noted in his memo that there's no comparable tier price range for under $50 using the Concord Light broadband, and that the Light Plant budget includes a 1% payment in lieu of franchise fee, which could be used to fund a pilot project that's been described. Now, I have no idea if the town is interested in doing this sort of thing, but it is a way of expanding the town's safety net for low income for broadband. Preliminary next steps that Vince has noted in his description is this is just a heads up. It's a description of the project. At your leisure, the committee take a look at some of the ideas of it. The project apparently is already underway on a limited basis at the Council on Aging and the Concord Housing Authority, because high-risk seniors have already signed up under the Comcast COVID-19 provisions for this service. As Vince is suggesting that as a PAC committee next steps, talk about this at the next meeting, and if it seems reasonable, discuss an implementation plan. And he says here for the duration of the emergency period, but also they would require coordinating with the town manager's office as well as the light plant to see if this is something that we could do as a joint project. So that's the short presentation on the proposed essential broadband discussion.
So one thing that that's one thing that I just want to ask is, this doesn't really seem like something that's necessarily for the PEG committee necessarily, because it is about providing broadband services, which is not something that the PEG committee is charged with doing.
Yeah. Peggy, do you want to make a comment? Then I can make a comment.
Sure. Oh, I was just going to say, but if half of the people who watch the MMN content are doing it via the internet, it seems like we want to make sure that they can have access to our program, to the programming provided by PEG.
Sure.
I'm sorry, this is Kate Hodges. I'm just asking a question. Is the end game for the committee that you want to try to work through the idea of using the payment in lieu of franchise to, I guess, assist people in getting broadband?
Arlen, and then I have a comment.
I would suggest that has not yet been decided. It is a possibility. And what we should do is really over the next couple of months, talk about it or do some more research or think about how this could work.
Okay, because I would think that, you know, the spending of whatever the PEG funds are and how that's allocated consistent with our franchise agreement is something that I think the town manager should weigh in on. So when and if the committee does come up with a decision, I guess I would ask that sort of a formal request or a formal, I guess it wouldn't really be a request, suggestion, or, you know, however you want to say is sort of submitted via Erin. And then perhaps we can have a group discussion about that where I could invite the town manager and try to understand the committee's perspective and how you arrived at this, because I'm weary, candidly, to be spending Comcast money, you know, even if it's from the light plant, we're getting that in lieu to pay for people's, you know, bills or whatever when they can, although I understand and appreciate the sentiment. And I want to make sure that I can identify some other funding sources if in fact you're seeing that as an issue for people in Concord, even if it's Hugh Cargill or other means of accessing. So I guess I'd like to understand the need if you're hearing as the committee that there's, you know, dozens of people that can't do that. That's news to me, but given that I'm also in charge of social services, I want to make sure that we're addressing that appropriately.
So I have a couple comments. One is we have asked the select board to give us some guidance some time ago about the three areas of which we work in terms of trying to support the Minuteman network, and one had, and there was been some non-trivial amount of discussion about what's operational versus what is content, what is our value proposition, and what's our role. We haven't really heard back from the select board on that subject matter, and this may be something that sits in that realm. The second thing I would just comment on, and I don't have an answer for, is if at the end of the day we're talking about a services that's offered by Concord Broadband and their intentions and their ability to address people that are financially limited, then that would seem to fall to Concord Broadband, which doesn't have a separate committee. And by the way, that's something that I've still have felt and continue to feel is a mistake. It still remains underneath the Light Plant Committee, and I don't think it gets the attention that it needs given the amount of money that the town has invested in it, but that's not our scope at this point. So my question would be, my comment would be, does this really belong with the Light Plant and or broadband related activities as opposed to with the PEG?
So I would suggest that you have Jeremy put that on a select board agenda and have a conversation with Dave Wood, who's obviously the head of the Light Plant, and somebody from their committee, so that you guys could have an open discussion, because that is beyond Aaron and I's purview.
Yeah, okay.
I think that makes a lot of sense, Scott, to have a discussion about it. And I think that would, and of course Vince isn't here, but I think he would agree with that approach. Now, I don't think we've heard from Wally or Peggy on this particular point.
You heard from me. I think that I think this sort of falls under programming, right? So suppose that there's somebody who doesn't have Comcast and can't afford to do the Concord Broadband, but wants to do Concord Broadband, but they want to access our programming. We want to make sure that people who are not on Comcast, but are town residents, can access our programming. So maybe we could phrase it that way.
Yeah.
And then you guys can operate however.
Yeah. Certainly that makes sense. One way to think about this, which is the philosophy that lies behind how we set up the Concord Broadband, was that it's like plumbing. You're paying for plumbing, and what happens to be coming down the pipe is bits, and it happens to be a pipe that's made out of glass. So the question is, you know, if an individual or somebody who's needs support to be able to get to the access of this, how do we get them a bucket of water or a pipe or a plumbing, so to speak, if you will? And there are many solutions to that, everything from cellular services with unlimited data, or with limited data that still might allow them to watch videos on YouTube, to other mechanisms that they go to YouTube, or, you know, there's a variety of ways of getting that pipe to them, so to speak. And I think it's okay for us to highlight that as a need and maybe make a recommendation, but that's kind of how I'm feeling. Again, this is me speaking more personally rather than, again, I'm trying to make sure that we navigate the scope that we're focused on to the area that is, you know, fundamentally the charge. So I will take Kate's suggestion and put it back on, work with Jeremy to get it back on the agenda for a discussion with the select board.
I think that makes sense. foresee some challenges given we're still rolling this out to new customers, and that's being done by Light Plan employees. I think transition.
Actually, just a quick correction there. It cannot be done by Light Plan employees. That has to be a separate financial entity from the Light Plant, because there's a very strict rule that says the ratepayers cannot subsidize or in any way be paying for the broadband services. To the extent that the broadband services has to rent the dark fiber from the Light Plant, and it has to be operated as a separate entity.
Good.
Yeah.
And I'll just state, I think it's a good idea to talk to them.
Yeah, no, I will do so, and I like the suggestion, and I will follow up. Thank you, Kate. The next thing on our agenda is the Minuteman Network update. Erin, would you care to speak to this?
Sure. So, I mean, due to the pandemic, we don't have a ton of an update. I will say that we are working on the Carlisle Town Meeting. Will be, Phil, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it is the 20th, so it's coming up in just a couple of days now. So we are working on that with Carlisle to make sure that they can have everything that they need and that we are recording it properly.
Quick question, is that going to be purely virtual?
No, it is, I believe, being done in their parking lot.
Yeah, that's correct. That's going to be at the school complex. It's not the parking lot. It's actually the basketball court area. There's actually like a small type of riser type of setup there. So that is the plan that's underway.
Interesting. All right, thank you.
Also, just a side note too, it also will be live streamed on minuteman.media.
So another thing that we are basically, the only other things that we're working on are helping out with the Zoom meetings. So we are posting those to YouTube and putting them up on our live feed so that people can watch it on TV or online. Those are being recorded by the committees and then given to us. We are live broadcasting the select board, school committee, and FinCom meetings because those were identified by the town manager as being meetings that needed to be live broadcast so that they could have a larger audience because those are regulatory. And what else do I have? We put out a call for businesses and for the general community to submit different videos. And we had a few from businesses that were non-commercial, which was what we were looking for. We have a story series from, I'm going to forget the name of the bookstore now.
The Concord Bookstore?
Barrow Books. As well as we have a few things coming from the library, and Deborah's Natural Gourmet sent us some cooking videos as well. So we've been putting those up, and we have some different videos from various groups around town, such as conservation groups and things like that. So, but other than that, things have been pretty quiet due to the pandemic. Like most departments, MMN was considered to be non-essential, and so things have been largely shut down, and we have been bringing in people periodically just to do the couple of Zoom meetings because we are trying to keep people out of the offices as much as possible and working remotely.
Mm. Okay, good. Thank you. Carlin?
I have 3 questions for you, Erin. One dealing with the status of the education coordinator. The second dealing with the capital plan for fiscal year 21. And third, when do you expect the MMN studio to reopen?
So working backwards here, the MMN studio, that will largely depend on when the town manager decides that we are ready to open various departments. It's going to be more or less a phased approach, and we haven't yet heard when that will be. So I'm working on a plan for when we do reopen. It'll look very different from how we've worked in the past, and will likely include having only one person in the office to help meet that 25% required workforce which even if you have a small workforce, 25% is even smaller. So, so we are working on a couple things for that. The capital budget has not changed. It is the same that was presented by Kate several months ago now. And to be perfectly honest, it's been quite a while since I was looking at the budget. We've been working almost solely on the pandemic, so I can't really speak to it at the moment. And as for the education coordinator, that is on hold at the moment, as are most positions which were being hired. So we will sort of see where things are going in the future. Like everything else, we're taking it very day to day at this point.
Could I just offer something? Sorry, this is Kate again. The education coordinator, when Erin and I were discussing it, is really directly tied to having a programming that is school-based. That was always how it was designed, and I think that kind of fell off for a bit at the end of CCTV's tenure, and that is what we were planning on bringing back. However, what school is going to look like and what is going to be allowed come September is still yet to be determined. And so our thought was not to bring a staff person on who A, might not be able to have access, or B, might have the conditions of his or her job change and therefore not be the job that we hired them to do. And so I think the committee will see that that is represented in the budget as a position. And I think when and if we're asked to talk about it again, I'm not sure if PEG is on the consent calendar or not, but we would have something that said that that would likely be unfilled for a number of months. I would imagine that we wouldn't have that position until phase 4, which is whatever the new normal is, and the okay from the school committee that yes, in fact, this can be, either an addition to the school day, an elective, or an after-school activity, and that we can make sure that we're able to fit all of the safety parameters and guidelines that the school committee has. So.
Okay, thank you. I do have one related question to this regarding the education content for PEG and a coordination with another element that's actually run from the high school. So the high school has a program, and that is its extension classes, in which they actually subsidize coursework online. This is a program that's been going for several years. So if someone wants to take a class in a certain area, they can go directly to the service provider. And I was trying to look up the name just now, and I'm sorry I don't have it in front of me, but I know it's an ongoing program. If you go directly to the service provider, you're charged a certain amount for each of these classes. So they're an online class, there's an instructor, there are tests, there's a lot of investment in that. If you go through Concord Carlisle Extension, that is actually subsidized by the town of Concord. So there is actually an educational content that is very much aligned or overlapping with what may be part of the Minuteman Network that comes through the high school extension. And I was wondering if either Kate or Jane or any of the folks that are on the town side could give us any comments about the vision of that overlap and coordination of those two.
I believe you're talking about Concord Carlisle Community Education. Is that correct?
Yes, correct.
Concord Carlisle Community Education is actually, they run their monies and their registrations through the school. That's not through the town of Concord. I mean, the school is in fact the town of Concord, but the money goes through a special revenue account that's located in their budgets and one that the town doesn't have access to or serve as administrator of.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I wasn't actually thinking about the money aspect of it so much as just the overlap of the role, the function, both being originating in the town, both having a focus to community education, and maybe purely from an what is it that we want to have or recommend that the Minuteman Network provide. Clearly, since both are coming from the town funding, right, even though it's indirectly through the school funding, I would think that you'd want to at least coordinate those so that there's, minimize the overlap of repeating the same thing from two different departments within the town.
Sure. So in the past, actually, CCTV used to run their community programming through Concord Carlisle Community Education. That's the way that it was done. So essentially, CCTV was the vendor for community ed. And so they would do, you know, editing, simple, you know, learning how to use some of the software, video making, you know, cartooning, those kind of things. And so people would sign up through Concord Carlisle Community Ed, and they would show up at the CCTV studio, and then one of the CCTV persons would, you know, run the class. But community ed does a lot more than just that. And so,
Right. Oh, yeah.
you know, they have a wide variety of kind of continuing education classes. So I think the idea would be to certainly to work with them. I can't see any reason why we would not. But the education coordinator position we're envisioning is more of a curriculum-based, school-based position, because that is what it was originally designed to be. I think it morphed into something else because Sam Kruger, frankly, had an excellent skill set and really did a great job of training people in the community, and really was such an asset that he sort of developed that position into a hybrid. But we have the lead producer or something else like that, that we were looking to do more of the community work. So the education coordinator we were kind of trying to bring that back to its roots, so to speak, so that it was more of a teacher type of thing, and more of a schedule of a teacher. Dealing with high school and middle school students versus the community.
Oh, okay. So you're in that context. That role was really more focused on students, educating them, helping them learn how to use the facilities of Minuteman Network. Is that what you're saying?
My understanding is that was CCTV's original idea, and I frankly liked that. I think it morphed into something else because we had a very talented individual who was in that position, and why wouldn't you want to share that? So you know, yeah, I think we're trying to go back to how it was intended to be.
Okay, well, all right. Peggy, did you have a comment?
Just as somebody who's you know, I've got a college student, and I would argue that even if maybe this would be addressed to the school committee, but I would argue that now is when kids need a lot of training, and teachers could use a lot of training in how to do the electronic stuff for generating content. So how to use Zoom, how to record stuff, how to edit things really easily. And I would think that having an education coordinator there to help teachers generate content and help the students generate content would be really useful. So I would advocate that maybe it would be useful to have the person be available sooner rather than later.
Okay, thank you. Great feedback. Yeah, interesting. David, you want to take a minute or two? You have to unmute.
Got my act together. Thanks. Just to check with Aaron one thing. Aaron, go back to the main committees that MN is facilitating Zoom for: Select Board, FinCom, School Committee. Key question, which has come up in discussions by the League, among other things, is a provision for live public back and forth when there's time for public comment or not.
I'm sorry, I'm not quite sure what the question is. Could you repeat
So in a typical select board meeting, get down to the end, it's time for public comment. There's live back and forth. Select board invites somebody to comment. There may be some exchange. Question is, in this virtual world, where select board, for instance, is out by Zoom, is there provision for live public back and forth in that public comment period? And likewise for FinCom and school committee. These are, after all, public meetings, and public is, after all, in democracy, the folks are supposed to be governing themselves in the event, if we could get to the technicality.
If I may, yeah, maybe, so David, your question relates to whether or not there's a mechanism for public comment in the context of Zoom meetings.
Exactly.
Okay, so I'm going to ask that we hold on to that to the end because we're really talking about the agenda item relating to the Minuteman network update. So if we could push that, I will bring that back at the end.
Oh, of course. Thanks.
I don't know that there's any other questions or comments relative to the Minuteman network update. Actually, Aaron, you had generated a list of items that you were looking for help with, basically.
Yes.
Do you want to talk about that at all at this time?
Sure. Let me, hold on. I have to find it in my.
Yeah, me too.
Used to
Aaron's
having,
suggestions for things to do.
yes. So this is something that I originally provided to the committee back in October, I think. So it was, well before the pandemic when things were a lot different. But some of the things are definitely still relevant and things that we'd still like the committee to weigh in on. Some of those include the sorry, my brain is very much in pandemic mode, so I'm trying to switch gears here.
If you'd like us to take this offline, we can do so, or we can circle back to you. Peggy, would that work for you, Aaron? Do you want to push it later in this meeting while you think about it for a minute?
Oh no, I can talk about it. I was just
Okay.
taking a quick look at it here.
Okay.
So some of the things that I was hoping that the committee could do was help us come up with recommendations for, or we'd really like the committee to come up with some recommendations for what would fall under, for instance, the public or the education, because sometimes we get programming that we have to make a decision and somebody may not like the decision of where we put it. For instance, if something is sent to us by the public, for instance, if I think the example that I put here is Jane Doe made an educational program about how to properly plant squash seeds. Would that be considered an educational piece because it is something that is educational in nature? Or would that be a public because that is being submitted by the public? And I guess my question is do we only put educational content that is created by the students? Whereas, I mean, especially right now, we don't know what that will look like going forward. So that is one of the questions that we wanted to have the committee take some time and come up with some recommendations as to what falls into those various categories. Another one of the questions that I had was, especially before the pandemic, things have obviously changed now, but looking at staff covering events. So in the past with CCTV, they had many volunteers who would help out, or they had a cast of high school students who had been trained on the equipment and things of that nature in order to help out. So we're trying to figure out what triggers us. We want to build more of a community support and more of a volunteer base, and that's something that we sort of pushed aside at first so we could get going, but now we're looking to expand that. But what triggers having a volunteer film as opposed to staff? Is it, do we ask everybody to, do we require, if you have an event, do we require you to have a volunteer or to try to find somebody first? And if you cannot find someone, or based on the nature of the work, if it is more complex, or the, for instance, if it's a,
birthday party was one that used before.
Yeah, a birthday party. But if you had a really elaborate birthday party that you felt that you needed, you had a band and a parade and all kinds of things going on, if you felt that you needed multiple people and it was going to be a very difficult shoot, how do you determine, do you say, no, we don't do that? But what's that line? Somebody says,
Yeah.
well, it's no longer a birthday party. Now it's just an event that happens to have children here. So we want to sort of come up with those guidelines as well. how do we prioritize requests? Is it specifically because somebody could come in and send us a series of requests that take up every single day of a week? Do we prioritize all of those, even though they could be all day events of, we could be, taping somebody meditating, but if they send in a request first, do we tape them as opposed to something else that might come in? I can't think of something on the top of my head.
Yeah, so
There's a lot of things here.
and I think I understand where you're driving with this, which is how do you triage these requests, and then part of that triage is how much recommendations on how you both triage it and also how you apply resources that are an expense to the town to those activities, where that's what you're kind of looking for, some guidelines. I'm going to stop and ask Carlin, did you have something you wanted to say? I saw you raise your hand, and then we'll come back to the.
I got a couple things. I went through your list, Erin, and I have responses for each one of your questions. So I'm going to very briefly go through them. First thing is start your training programs, not for kids, but for adults like me who want to learn how to use the camera, how to do editing, that sort of thing. So whoever's in charge of training adults, get that training program started, because that will allow you to have volunteers who have the expertise to take the place of staff so more stuff can be covered.
Right.
Second, what does it matter if it's public or education? To me, the concern is to balance it out, to justify and demonstrate the need for 3 PEG channels, because that will become important when it comes down for the license renewal. Are we using all 3 PEG channels? At this point, the town is operating all 3. In some other towns, the town operates just the government channel and a private entity operates the PEG and education. In that latter case, I'd be more concerned about what's P versus E. But here, to me, balance them out as far as the workload.
So if I could just,
I'm not done yet. Let me get through my list, because then you can go through this. Staff availability is critical. I know you have only a few people to do this. That's why I think it's important that the staff availability and your discretion on how you prioritize is important. If there's a complaint and we hear about it, we'll bring it to you, and perhaps that's the way to resolve it. Is it after the fact situation? Next question was about what is the current marketing strategy? And I have no idea what your current marketing strategy, and I'd actually like to hear it from you and from Phil, what your current marketing strategy is. And I know that Wally's also been trying to say stuff too, so I will cede my time to him or to whoever wants to respond. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Carlin. Wally, did you have something?
No.
Oh, okay. Great. Erin, did you have any comments back, or shall we wrap up this discussion?
well, I think that in terms of the public versus education, we have had people that have raised concerns over what is going on to either channel, which is why we're asking for the committee to come up with recommendations. These are all things that have been raised, which is why we're bringing them to the committee, and we're asking for you all to help us as the community members who know what the community would feel most comfortable with, and as representatives of the community. We're looking for your assistance in all of these matters, which is why I've brought them to the committee. We have our own, obviously we have our own thoughts on various items, but we really want to hear from you all, and would appreciate if you would take some time and do some research and come up with recommendations, and really, help us come up with what, for instance, the requirements for volunteering. Should we just let anybody come and take our equipment, or should we require something? These are questions that we have our own thoughts, but as the community, you may disagree with us, and we want to know what those thoughts are, and we'd like everyone to to take some time and to perhaps have the committee come up with memos for each of these questions, especially the political programming. We'd really like for the committee to come up with a draft policy for us to take a look at, as that is something that has come up numerous times now. And we've been told by various entities that it would be best for it to be coming from the town, but we'd like for the committee to do some research and to create a draft policy that we can start working off of. And in terms of the marketing strategy, I mean, right now we are working, doing what we can based on the fact that we are in the middle of a pandemic. And because we have just 3 staff members at the moment, there hasn't been much marketing going on, but we really like, I found that you all have some great ideas in terms of marketing. And so I'd really like if the committee could come up with some marketing strategies that we could perhaps start to implement. I think that as the community, that's a really great use of this talent pool.
Okay, Aaron, let me just stop for a second. Peggy, did you have a comment? And then I have a quick one.
do. I have 2. I have one on the line that says, all of our content has come from the community during the pandemic, showcasing that it not only can be done, but how easily it can be created and sent in. As a person who has sent in programming, I would like you to know that it is not always that simple. And if I did not already know how to use the editing software, and if I was not really techie and I didn't know how to do the Zoom stuff, I would not have been able to do it. So I think that that is underestimating the amount of effort it takes. So
I'm not underestimating the amount of effort it takes. I know it takes a lot of effort.
But you said it's easily done. It is not easily done. The other thing I wanted to mention is for the marketing plan, what are you trying to sell? Are you saying, hey, we can put your programming on? Hey, we can educate you, just sort of the general stuff? Or are you saying, hey, we need programming? Are you saying, hey, we can make programming? Well, what are you trying to market?
All of the above.
All of the above. Okay. I will think about that.
Yeah, so I do think we can take that as a request, Aaron, to put on our plate. And so let me think about how we can frame that. It'll probably end up being a new agenda item because of the constraints of open meeting law. You know, unfortunately, we'd have to do this in the context of these committee meetings. Maybe we can make some assignments. Peggy, did you have a comment?
I was going to say I would volunteer to be on a subcommittee that would make a draft document that we could then talk about in the open meeting. And if one other person would like to help me with that, that would be lovely, if that would be useful.
I think that would be very useful.
Okay.
So let's plan for that. Do we need to vote on that, Carlin?
My understanding, and Ruth, I want you to correct me, is that Peggy has volunteered to do the document. If someone offers to help,
yes,
then you're not creating a subcommittee. You have a helper, and I'm volunteering to help her for that.
Thank you, Carlin.
Therefore, no vote would be needed. Ruth, am I on base with that?
I think she voiced yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay,
So be it. Thank you. Your volunteering has been accepted, and we're going to go down that path. Thank you very much.
All right, and we have the summer, which is lovely. So
yeah.
Okay.
Hey, Aaron, I just had an idea while you were describing this, and I can send you the link afterwards. In terms of enabling people who may not have as much technical skill, but have something to say, there's a couple ideas that I just wanted to throw out to you. There is a thing under NPR called the Story Lab, and I'll send the link to you, but it's basically a web portal where you can go in and tell a story, and then they can use that as a basis for driving things forward. There's another one that's part of Story Slams, and I'll have to go figure out where the heck it is. And there may be either conceptually or otherwise, there may be a way to have someone who's less technically trained be able to at least feed that input, which says, hey, I have a story to tell. This is why I think we should tell it. And it might be a way to provide an on-ramp for content is the way I would look at it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to say that, Peggy, I'm not.
Oh, no. I didn't understand, but I'm just like throwing it out there. And yeah, so I'm not offended or anything. I'm just
no. I will just say that we have had numerous people that have just taking a video on their iPhones of them, either, them walking around or taking, is not necessarily movie quality, but it's more that people are creating content and that they are trying, and that, we've had a lot of people, I say a lot, we've had a few people send in videos of, for instance, them taking a walk and, them seeing a beautiful panoramic shot while they're over at the Great Meadows, and so they send it to us. And sometimes we incorporate it into various things, or they say, this was a beautiful sunset. If you have someplace to put this, feel free to loop it into your things like that. So I'm not saying that everybody's is necessarily movie quality or even high quality, but sometimes people are sending us stuff anyways, and we really appreciate it.
That's exciting. I will say real quickly, the school district, the superintendent sends out stuff, and there's sometimes links to student created content. So if those aren't going up, maybe you could use those too.
Yeah, when it's student created, we really have to, get permission from the school and from the students and parents and whatnot.
Maybe I can send you the links or something if you're looking for content.
Oh, we're always looking for content.
All right, I'll send you a link.
So that was actually a follow-up question I had, Aaron, around this, is if you start to accept pictures or video feeds that are more informally gathered, do we run afoul of any needs for permissions of people that are shown or other things of that nature? If I happen to submit a video feed, but it happens to have an advertising sign that slides across it, is that a commercial thing? Or, or if it's very strongly features some business in town, or I don't know if there's any issues around that. Maybe that just has to be monitored on your side before it gets out the door, or on the Minuteman Network side.
Yeah, so that'd be something that our great team over at MMN would be on the lookout for. Thankfully, we haven't had any issues like that, but we always have people sign a release saying that they are allowing us to use their content and that they got permission from various people in the videos and things like that.
So that's something to think about. All right, cool.
Can I
Sure, Wally.
I just want to be very careful about putting anything up that has students in the video.
Yes, agreed.
Photographs, because that's a particular sign-off need. It's things that we post and are fair game, but just be careful with that.
Yeah, we always want to make sure that even things that are sent to us by the school, we double check with the superintendent or with the school principals and things like that, making sure that it's allowed to go out. And for instance, we've had some things that were created by students that they have asked us to to help them put together, but that aren't necessarily, they don't have all the permissions. And so they ask us to not show it on cable, things like that. Just, we want to be careful with our students.
Yeah, I just was curious how it worked. We presumed you were taking care of it. I think we can finish with this subject now. Since Vince is not here, Carlin, were you going to talk about the FCC update as well?
Right, I really should have a hat that says, "I'm Vince for the moment." He was called away at the last minute for work reasons, but he'll be back at the next meeting. Another document that I sent out today was a telecom industry outlook, which is an update of what's going on at the FCC, cable related, as well as what's going on just generally with broadband, because Vince is very interested in that sort of stuff. The two things I want to highlight this first about the FCC order that deregulated cable in 32 towns in Western Massachusetts. This was the charter order that was entered last year, and Vince is concerned about its potential impact on if Comcast chose to do it in our particular area. And the other thing is, under his suggested actions, is most of this is just background information, just a preliminary heads up, and suggested that the PAC get advice from the Department of Telecom and Cable on the implementation of any new cable regulations that are coming down the pike. That might be something we put on the agenda for next year, something going forward. And then also he notes that the budgeting is still aligned with the town's budgeting plans overall, and suggested at a future PAC agenda item to talk about complex tech issues and how to integrate them, how they affect the cable TV and PEG access. So that's the brief update.
Okay, so help me out just a little bit. Is there an action to put something in the future agenda out of that update? I'm sorry.
Not necessarily for the next meeting, but sometime for next year, about talking about how to give advice on complex technical issues that affect cable TV, and perhaps invite or ask for a representative from the Department of Telecom Cable to come talk to us about pending regulations, like what we did not last year, but the year before, something like that.
You said board representative of Telecom and Cable?
The Department of Telecom and Cable, sorry.
This is be the person that's in the the Concord Light Plant, telecom coordinator?
No, no, that's another good idea. No, what I was talking about is the state level.
Okay.
But also, we should have the new telecom director come talk to us, just to give some input on what the light plant's doing as far as broadband stuff. I would find it useful.
Okay.
And that's all that I had.
Give me a second to make a note. Apologize. So at this point in the agenda, the next thing that would be on it would be the opportunity for public attendee comments. So David, maybe you could talk a little more about the question you had. If you could do me a favor, we could constrain it to 5 to 10 minutes the most.
Hopefully we can do a hell of a lot better than that. It's a simple question. Enabling in these virtual public meetings, starting with the main events such as the select board or the FinCom or the school committee, enabling public back and forth at the end of them. That's the whole question. And I think you saw that as something to come up at the end. So over to you, sir. And I see Wally there, so I'm going to mute myself again.
I just want to point out that the school committee does allow public comment live. If you're on the Zoom call and raise a hand, we will unmute during public comment. We'll unmute and allow comment. Since we've been doing that, we haven't had anybody take advantage of it, but the option.
I have to say, good show.
Go ahead, David.
I have to say, good show. Perhaps we could learn what the situation is with the select board.
This is Jane here. The select board as well, it has been, at least in the last month, reporting on public comment and taking public comments live in the meeting. And we have just simply had very few attendees. That may be because our meetings have been on Thursdays at 4 o'clock. They're now going back to Monday. The schedule has been unfamiliar to people. I don't know. Obviously, it's not a public hearing, so it's not a debate. It's a meeting, but comments on the agenda or comments that come in are welcome.
Jane, thank you for the comment and the feedback. Just a quick question for both Wally and Jane. Do you guys, in those meetings, respectively school board and select board, do you attempt to have those comments interspersed in the agenda, or do you hold them all to the end?
We have a spot in the agenda at the beginning of the meeting.
At the beginning?
At the beginning. That doesn't preclude us on a high-interest item from having a public comment. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, broke up a little bit.
From having public comment during discussion of that topic.
Okay. All right, thank you. Any other comments on this subject matter?
Hang on, I'm just trying to.
Are you
I would just
taking,
say that the
this
select
is Brooks
board
Reed.
usually puts its public comment at the very end of the meeting. So again, we wouldn't, it just depends on what comes in.
Okay, so thank you. All right, thank you very much for that. I think that we're down to the end of the agenda that we had. At this point, I'd like to look for a motion to adjourn.
Actually, before you do that, can you hear me?
Certainly.
This is Brooks Reed.
Yes, Brooks.
So, so I was at the February 24th town meeting warrant article preview meeting. I presented on Article 45, and that's the electronic recording of select board executive sessions. And after I gave my presentation, Colin Reed suggested that I appear before your committee to ask about the use of Minuteman Media Network for recording of select board executive sessions. And I've sent 2 emails to you directly, Scott, and also one to PAC 2 days ago. I haven't heard anything back. I'm wondering if I'm just trying to communicate with you improperly or what's going on.
Brooks, I apologize for any email that you sent to me that got missed, because I do not use a separate email, and I get a lot of emails that are noise, I guess is the best way to say it. So I apologize for that. I'm glad you did come to this meeting. So I had in my listed things to do was to create a separate email like Carlin did, just for this purpose, so that none of these things would get lost in the bucket. So I do apologize. So could you repeat your question, and is there something that we can answer here live during this meeting?
Well, possibly. So I am the lead petitioner on 2020 annual town meeting Article 45, which asks the town to vote to urge the select board to record select board executive sessions. And the reason for that is that there are something like a dozen executive sessions have been held for which the meetings are still not finalized. We're about to lose the 4th of 5 select board members who are in those meetings. And the content of those meetings is going to be approved eventually by people who are never there. And it's hard to imagine that the information contained in those minutes will accurately reflect what happened, given the fact that years have elapsed since those meetings occurred and the minutes weren't finalized. So this warrant article proposes that we record the sessions with the intention of releasing those recordings when the minutes get released for those executive sessions. And Carlin pointed out that there may be an issue with Minuteman Media Network recording those, and I hadn't considered how they might get recorded, but I think she brought up an important point about understanding how we might record that information should the town decide that that's an important thing for them. And it might be good to have a discussion and provide some information to the town when the article comes up before town meeting later this year.
So Brooks, let me see if I can restate the problem that you're posing to us to make sure I have it clear. The issue is that recording these executive sessions would need to be kept confidential until such time as the minutes were released, and that the people that would actually be doing the recording may or may not be, they would then be privy to the contents of that executive session ahead of the time that would be released based on the minutes. Is that the issue?
I understood that to be the point that Carlin was making, although we didn't really discuss it at that time, and I'd welcome her input at this point. But obviously it's not an agenda item, and I realize you probably can't talk about it now, but I think it would be good to have it on your agenda so you can have a discussion about whether Minuteman Media Network could deal with it, or whether it has to be handled in some other way, and just essentially be prepared to say something useful about it at town meeting.
Okay, Carlin, any comments before I take an action here?
I need to think about it.
Okay, so I'll take this same position as Brooks. I'll make a note of this. First of all, I apologize again for missing your email. I think it's okay for us to think about it, whether or not it's in our scope to make that recommendation, or if this is something the town who runs Minuteman Network will have to deal with. Ultimately, if the Article 45 causes us to happen, then it's the implementation of that same thing that we can think about it. Perhaps I can talk to Aaron offline or to Phil offline about how this might be accomplished so that we can provide some background relative to town meeting. That's all I can suggest at this moment.
Okay, terrific. Thank you very much.
Okay. Any other comments? So I move to adjourn the meeting.
Second,
And who was that?
Peggy.
Okay, so I guess we have to do a roll call again. So real quick, Carlin,
Yes, adjourn.
Peggy, yes, because you seconded it. Ruth,
Yes.
myself, yes. Wally.
Hey.
Okay, we're adjourning the meeting. Thank you very much.